Today, we are diving into a legal puzzle straight from the Supreme Court that sounds, well, more like a riddle. Can you actually use force by doing nothing at all? Let's find out.
I mean, really think about that. Can you commit a violent crime by just sitting still? It sounds impossible, right? But the Supreme Court's surprising answer has some huge implications for how our legal system defines violence itself. So, to get our heads around this, let's start with a hypothetical situation, and this comes directly from one of the justices' opinions. Picture a lifeguard sitting up on his chair. He sees a swimmer struggling in the water. He knows it's his duty to save them, but he doesn't move. He just sits there and watches as a swimmer drowns. Is that an act of violence?
That very question, that lifeguard scenario, gets us right to the heart of this entire legal puzzle. Can doing nothing, can inaction itself be a crime?
Because, this isn't just some abstract thought experiment for law students. This exact question was at the core of a major Supreme Court case, and let me tell you, the decision has some very serious, very real-world consequences, especially for criminal sentencing.
To really understand how this all played out, we have to look at the actual case. And this story involves a mobster, a hitman, and a really, really clever legal argument. All right, so the guy at the center of all this is Salvatore Delligatti, an associate of the Genovese crime family. He hired a street gang to murder a suspected informant, and he even provided them with a car and a loaded gun for the job. Now, the plot got foiled, but Delligatti was charged with using a firearm during a crime of violence.
Okay, now here is where the case takes a really strange turn. Because of a legal rule called the categorical approach, the court was actually forbidden from looking at what Delligatti did. Yeah, you heard that right. They couldn't consider the hitman or the murder plot. They could only look at the abstract legal definition of the crime on the books.
It kind of breaks down into three weird steps. First, you totally ignore what the person actually did and just read the law. Second, you have to imagine the absolute least violent way that crime could ever possibly be committed. And third, you ask, does even that bare-bones version of the crime require the use of physical force? If the answer is no, then it's not a crime of violence under this particular law.
And this is exactly where Delligatti's lawyers saw their opening. They argued that under New York law, you can commit murder by inaction. Think of a parent intentionally withholding food from their child. That's legally murder, but there's no active physical force being used. So their argument was, hey, since you can commit murder by doing nothing, the crime itself doesn't always require force. Pretty clever loophole, huh?
So, how did the court deal with that seemingly airtight argument? Well, the majority came back with a pretty stunning answer, one that basically redefines what force even means.
The justices were fundamentally split on the meaning of one simple word, use. The majority said that intentionally causing harm, even by doing nothing, still counts as a use of force. It's like you're using something else, poison, nature, whatever, as your weapon. But the dissent completely disagreed. They argued that use has to mean you are actively doing something. In their view, inaction is just letting something happen, not actively using it.
To really drive their point home, the majority offered a powerful and pretty grim analogy. They wrote, "A mother who purposely kills her child by declining to intervene when the child drinks bleach makes use of the bleach's poisonous properties." So here's the key principle they landed on. Under their logic, the deliberate choice not to act can become a tool. That mother is harnessing the destructive power of the bleach to achieve her goal. And the court decided that absolutely counts as a use of that force. But not everyone on the court was buying it. The dissenters argued that the majority was basically just twisting the plain English meaning of words to get the result they wanted.
The dissent, which was led by Justice Gorsuch, focused like a laser on the simple meaning of the word use. They wrote, the various definitions of use imply action. One does not use something through mere inactivity, inertia, or non-activity. For the dissenters, the point was dead simple. Words matter. The law says use of physical force, and in their view, that can only mean one thing, a violent physical act. You can't just stretch that phrase to cover the passive failure to do something, no matter how evil the intent or how tragic the outcome. So there you have it, two completely opposite views on what the word use means. So where did the court finally land, and what does it all mean for the law going forward? Well, in the end, the decision wasn't even close. The majority's view won in a decisive 7-2 vote.
The Supreme Court's final ruling was completely unambiguous. They decided that the knowing or intentional causation of death, whether it's by an act or a failure to act, does in fact involve the use of physical force. Salvatore Delligatti lost his appeal, and just like that, the law was settled.
So, what's the big takeaway here? The Supreme Court has officially expanded the legal definition of violence. It's no longer just about doing something. A deliberate failure to act can now be seen as a use of force. And that leaves us with a really provocative question. What other inactive behaviors could be next on the list?